I'm Larry Magid, and this is Are We Doing Tech Right? A podcast from Connect Safely, where we speak with experts from tech, education, government, and academia about tech policies, platforms, and habits that affect our daily lives. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe and visit us at ConnectSafely.org. My guest today is James Beser, the Director of Product Management for YouTube Youth Products. James, why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about what you've done at YouTube?
So in my time at YouTube, I've helped launch new products for kids, tweens, and teens to really think about the under 18 experience and how we can make it safer and higher quality. And before YouTube, I have been at Google now, 13 years almost exactly,
Wow.
And did a sort of 10 years in the online ads business. And before that, I attended UCLA School of Management. And before that, University of Michigan. I am a third generation Wolverine and bleed maize and blue.
Well, I'm impressed that you've managed to keep yourself from getting overweight after having access to 13 years of Google food. So that alone is impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, it didn't start off so good for me. I definitely put on the 10 pounds right away with access to such great snacks, but I have learned to be disciplined.
And I've been around Google long enough to remember Charlie before he became a multimillionaire and went off and created his own restaurant.
Yes, Charlie's Cafe is a great source of calories for me.
Charlie, by the way, was Google's original chef. Yeah. So before we get into some of the newer things, let's talk a little bit about how YouTube approaches the three age groups, adults, teens, and children, because you actually have products for each of these groups. So let's talk about adults and how adult content, and by adult content, I don't mean adult-only content, I mean content that isn't oriented at children, how that can or cannot be consumed by people under 18.
Sure. So we spend a lot of time thinking about these age groups, as you mentioned. At least three age groups sort of under the age of 18. You've got your sort of preschool age kids, you've got your tweens, and you've got your teens. And I can give you the age cutoffs, but they're really kind of gray areas as kids grow up into their teen years. And that 18 line is very important. A lot happens in society at 18. You can, be drafted, you are a legal adult, et cetera. And it's an important age cutoff for YouTube as well, where we have policies that cut at those different lines, right? So we have age-based policies. And at 18, we actually start calling content that is appropriate only for 18 plus. We call it mature content. And that is age-gated. So if you are not 18 on YouTube, you do not have access to some of that mature content. We publish these policies in our help center, but extreme amounts of violence, et cetera. Now, I should mention that this is not like rated X content. This is not porn.
Right.
We do not allow.
That's not allowed at all on the platform.
Correct. But, think of MPAA ratings in the US are one way to think about that. So we really don't get too far beyond what you might see in a rated R movie, for instance, with this kind of content. But we do not believe under the age of 18 that it is appropriate to be, allowing those under 18.
And then you have
users.
YouTube Kids, which we actually helped consult on when you were building it. And talk a little bit about that product.
Sure, of course, I'd love to. Fun fact, YouTube Kids turns 10 next year.
Wow.
So it was launched in 2015, which seems like a lifetime ago. And YouTube Kids is built from the ground up for the youngest users on YouTube. It's a separate app. Up until very recently, only a separate app. Last year, we launched YouTube Kids as an embedded profile on the connected TVs and devices, where you can now access the YouTube Kids app directly from there, as you might imagine. Connected devices in the living room are a very popular place for families to co-watch content together. And that has been very well received by our family users. And in the YouTube Kids app, we provide a number of age-appropriate experiences. We have 3 different libraries of content for parents to pick from that range from preschool to school age on up. The design is built from the ground up for pre-literate kids, right? So there's not a lot of text so that kids can navigate it. We spend a lot of time in our labs watching how kids interact with apps and online experiences to make sure that they can really use it independently, right? And of course, behind the scenes on YouTube Kids, we ensure that the kids get the highest quality experience possible. We spend a lot of time with our outside panel of experts, the Kids and Families Advisory Committee, where you can go and see who we've been working with globally. And we develop principles for what high quality content and low quality content might look like. And we use kind of the machinery at YouTube and our recommendation systems to ensure that without the parents being involved, we are raising up the highest quality content in our recommendations and trying to diminish the lower quality, but still safe content that does exist in the corpus, in the library.
I wish that was available when my kids were little. We just had television. And even with broadcast TV, we had to be careful. Our strategy was to keep the dial up on PBS so they could watch Sesame Street. But then they learned to switch the dial, so all bets were off. You recently launched some new tools for young people and parents. And tell us a little bit about these products that are now out there to help parents protect their own teens and children.
Absolutely. So recently we launched a product for supervising teens on YouTube. We have had supervised products, as I mentioned before. We've had the YouTube Kids app for almost a decade, and that is a supervised product for little kids. In 2021, we launched a supervised product aimed at tweens. This is now on the main YouTube app, the flagship main YouTube product. And I can talk about that in a little bit, but you asked about the teen product. For teens, we have a voluntary product where the teen and the parent have to agree to be supervised. And the goal of that product isn't really heavy-handed controls. The goal there is, at least with this first launch, is to have and encourage healthy conversations between parents and teens. Again, in talking to our outside panel of experts, it became very clear that it's really important that teens have a sense of agency online and their privacy is respected. That's very important to us. It was very important to the experts we spoke to and very important to teens. And it goes as far as if you have this sort of police state with parents getting in all their business, it's negative for teen well-being, as I think makes sense to most people. So this is a voluntary supervised product. There's a QR code kind of bumping and matching that happens between the parent's YouTube account and the kid's YouTube account, the teen's YouTube account. And this first launch, we focused on teen participation on YouTube. It's very common for teens to want to be creators on YouTube. And of course, we allow that by policy. If you're 13 plus, you can be a creator. And the insights that we are producing is for when a teen uploads a video, if they start a live stream, if they get comments on their channel, and we send notifications to both the parent and the teen. So they get kind of the same updates, the same information is available to the parent as the teen, as well as when we update the parent, we provide them resources such as a guide that we developed on healthy and productive creation on YouTube that was built in partnership with Common Sense Networks.
I think I know the answer. I'm going to ask you the same question I ask everybody who puts in any type of parental management or moderation tools or whatever. Some teens may have legitimate interests that they don't want to talk to their parents about. It may be political, it may be religious, it may be reproductive rights, it may be sexual orientation, whatever. How do you protect the teen's privacy in terms of those issues where at the same time providing the parents with the tools they need to make sure their kids are staying safe?
It is a great question, and it's a huge challenge. And as I mentioned before, it's really important that we respect a teen's privacy. Many of these exact examples you just provided are reasons for that principle. And that is why it's voluntary, right? So a teen may have many channels, and they have to agree when they are going to allow their parents in on supervising them. Co-supervising is a way to think about it. Because, for instance, when they do upload a video, the parent will get a notification with a link to that video, right? So if the teen is uncomfortable for any reason because of a privacy concern they may have, then they don't have to agree to be supervised.
What about if they're consuming a video? Does the parent know about every video they watch?
No. As of now, we don't have any plans to provide insight into a teen's watch history or their search history. We believe that is fundamentally private to a teen. And, we do not believe that it will necessarily generate the kind of healthy conversations that we're aiming to do with our launches.
I completely agree. I think that's a good strategy. And let's talk about conversations. I mean, with or without these tools, conversations are and have been shown to be the most effective way for parents and teens to work together to try to have a healthy relationship. And it's safety, it's well-being, it's time management. There's so many aspects of both social media and media consumption where parents and teens can work together to create a much healthier environment. By the way, not just for the teens, but also for the parents themselves. Many of us should be drinking our own Kool-Aid in that respect, taking our own advice, so to speak. But let's talk about that conversation. What should that look like?
That's a very interesting question. I will say right now, I have two teens myself. It's a constant struggle. I want to recognize that and I have a lot of sympathy and empathy, if you will, for parents of teens, especially today. It's a very confusing and complicated time. And I think it all starts from a position of respect. What our experts would say is recognizing that they have agency. One of the things we believe internally, and it's a principle of ours, and I do try and use this in my own home, is trying to build a pattern of, they're going to be on their own, right? They're going to have to be digital citizens themselves, and they're going to have to recognize things that don't quite smell right, scams and inbound unhealthy communications on YouTube or off YouTube. They can be very convincing, and even adults can fall for them. So trying to make sure that they are building the patterns and being educated on what those things might look like and how to elevate them to me as their parent when they're uncomfortable or when they don't have, if they're unsure. But really trusting them and giving them tools is a huge part of that, because at some point they will be on their own and you won't be there. And so how are we going to raise that next generation of healthy digital citizens?
I'm so glad you said that, because I actually gave a talk recently and my comment was, we're not raising children, we're raising adults. And with any luck, hopefully, whether you want it or not, those kids are going to turn 18 and they're going to, at some point, hopefully leave the house. Maybe not. Maybe you've got a really great couch they can continue to sleep on. But the fact of the matter is that they're going to be on their own. You're absolutely right. And it's what they can take with them for life that really matters in the long run. Let's talk a little bit about time management, and especially YouTube's responsibility. What is the responsibility of a company like YouTube or Google and YouTube to make their products appealing, of course, but at the same time, I don't want to say addictive because I don't really believe in that term, but to the point where it's difficult for people to pull away from them to have a more balanced life?
It's such an important question, Larry. It's kind of one of the questions of the day, and I'm really glad you asked. And it's a very complicated and textured problem and answer. So let me hit on a few points. I think first, it's important to us at YouTube, for all users, but especially for youth, that time on YouTube is time well spent. We've seen recent research about how YouTube is one of the least regretted platforms out there, and that is something we take very seriously and are very proud of. And you might imagine that's not a coincidence. As I mentioned before, we spend a lot of time thinking about what is the right content to elevate to youth in terms of quality and in terms of well-being. You may have seen some announcements from us recently about teens' recommendations changes that we've made to lower the incidence of safe, but perhaps in volume, not well-being positive or could be well-being negative for some teens. Content like some content that might compare body types, for instance, or have negative social comparisons in general. And so we spend a lot of time on just baseline responsibility of making our recommendations really leading to the best possible, least regretted, if you will, or higher well-being outcomes for teens and kids. And you asked specifically about time management. For the littlest of kids, we have parental controls where you can set times in the YouTube Kids app, et cetera. But as we mentioned before, and we talked about before, it's about building agency. And it's just another area where teens need to learn, okay, maybe I've eaten too much Ben and Jerry's ice cream, I should put the phone down, or maybe I should go to sleep. And we do have reminders, break reminders in the app. They are on by default for under 18s. After an hour, you'll get a, hey, maybe you should put the device down. And at late night, we have bedtime reminders. And we're always thinking of ways to make those better. Really trying to put the teens in charge of setting their own guidelines and boundaries. That is something we are thinking a lot about right now.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to assume that the majority of users at all age groups are consuming video more than uploading, creating video. But there are a lot of young people who are interested in creating video, and it can often lead to some very positive things in their life, potentially financial, but certainly educational and social, et cetera. So talk a little bit about creative, teens as creators of video, and what approach they should take and what approach should their parents take to make sure that what the kids are posting are reflective of the values of the family, yet at the same time giving the teen agency to be creative and maybe even take some chances.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic question. We completely agree. And in fact, parents and experts agree as well that creation is a very healthy activity. And we want to encourage teens to find a home as creators on YouTube. And a few things I might say there is there's obviously safety questions. When you put yourself out there on any social media or video platform like YouTube, You can invite people to comment on your video. And it's really important that teens, or really anyone, can recognize, problematic inbound comments, for instance, right? Like a lot of times the bad actors might try and, hey, come to my Telegram or something like that. Like there are some basic things there where we might need a teen to really understand how to do it. And that's a great place for parents to get involved and help train and educate themselves and their teens as to how to recognize those kinds of things. So there's baseline safety. That's the most important, I think, of the areas we might really hope teens would understand and spend time to really recognize. And then I think it's YouTube's goal to give everyone a voice and show them the world. And we want teens to really kind of go out there. And I think in my ideal scenario, some of these principles we mentioned before about what is high quality content, what is well-being positive content, being a positive role model, for instance, you might imagine. It's one thing that I would say personally, I would really hope that teens on YouTube can, be the example of what it is to be online, to be a positive role model for their peers and for folks younger than them. The tweens look up to the teens. And I think there's a great opportunity in society for teen creators on YouTube to be those positive role models.
And what
tell
about
us about something that interests you, et cetera.
There are a lot of kids that are interested in becoming creators, and hopefully most of them will have chats with their parents before they go into that. What should parents say to their kids? How can they support that and at the same time help their child be a creator in a way that's going to make them feel good and do well?
Can I first mention that to the parents, a message for you? You're doing a great job, right? One thing that we've learned through this process, talking to lots of parents, is there's a bit of a parent mental health crisis happening as well, right? And it is a very difficult time to be a parent. And you're doing a great job, keep up the good work. And if you're asking this question of how can I help my kid or my teen, et cetera, become a creator, you're well ahead of the game. So keep up the good work. All right. Now, what can you do as a parent? It's very important, obviously, to make sure that you're teaching them the basics of being safe. I think we talked a bit about this before. What does a comment look like that looks a little funny or a little creepy? There's a lot of tools for creators at YouTube, like moderating comments, et cetera. I would get very educated, and there's a lot of great resources on our help center. And I'm sure there's third-party resources that will be very informative on the baseline safety of being a creator and what tools are available on, say, YouTube Studio, which is our product for creators to manage their channels. And then once you get past the baseline safety, I think you get into well-being. So make sure that this is a healthy pace of uploads, that you shouldn't feel like you need to upload multiple times a day, or even, it's a weekend. Set the ground rules on where in the stack rank of priorities in your house this should fit, right? And every parent is going to be different and have their own ground rules. And summer is different than the fall, et cetera. And, be cognizant of that. And then I think you get to, how can I help my kid find an audience or be appealing? And I think that's obviously very, what is important to you or what is important to your child. Authenticity matters a lot. It matters a lot for everyone, but it matters especially for, the under 18s and the youth today. They're very good at sniffing out a fake message. So, be your authentic self and be safe.
And what about challenges that I think affect a lot of people who put themselves out in media? The kid next door has got more followers than I do. I'm nervous because I'm not getting enough feedback. I'm not getting enough positive comments. I'm not sure I'm looking quite good enough. I mean, there's all of these pressures that I have them as a journalist. I mean, not exactly the same, but I'm certainly aware of how many people are reading me, how many people are watching my television programs, et cetera. For a young person, that could be very challenging.
Oh, I totally agree. We are in a comparative society. Of course, getting invited to birthday parties, et cetera, everyone's going to compare. And I do recognize, though, online, there's metrics tied to that, and so a higher responsibility. And I think I might mention we're trying to reward those creators that don't go out and just compare themselves negatively to others or try and jump on unhealthy trends like that compare body types, et cetera. Some might say that platforms in society might promote too much of that, right? Too much comparison, too much focus on beauty, et cetera. And of course, a great makeup video. I love it when my daughter, for instance, watches Get Ready With Me videos, right? And I think it's been a very positive force. But if it's like, hey, make my nose look thinner or make my eyes look different, that is where we have started to say, hey, look, we're going to suppress that stuff in recommendations because of the viewer side. But I think it also plays a part on the creator side as well. But at the end of the day, creators are trying to find an audience, and we need to give them feedback so they can tell when their message resonates or when it doesn't. But my personal hope is that we can have a society that isn't so focused on fame and fortune for our youngest people, but focused on giving them a voice, helping them find community. And that's not always measured by number of likes or subscribers.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned kind of the broader societal issues, because in many cases, what happens on social media, and I don't know whether you consider YouTube social media, but it's part of that, is an amplification of things that are out there anyway. I mean, I remember as a young child comparing myself to other people, and this is long before there was an internet, just, walking down the street or being in the schoolyard, noticing that somebody has a better quality sweater on than I do, or things of that nature. I want to wrap up soon, but let's just talk in general about health. And I'm mostly meaning mental health. There's been a lot of accusations that technology has something to do with the mental health problems of American youth. And I suspect it probably does have something to do with it, just like lots of things have something to do with it. But there's this notion that it's primarily responsible. And there are people who argue that, creating rules to restrict social media to 16 or 18 will somehow have a serious positive impact on our mental health problems. And I'm wondering, I know you're not a psychologist, but I know you do work with experts, what your thoughts are about that.
I mean, it's certainly a very zeitgeist issue and discussion right now. And most of what I've seen here isn't necessarily causal analysis. It's correlation. There's a lot of like, hey, in 2010, the front-facing camera was long, whatever, right?
Yeah. There's been a couple of best-selling books that have made that allegation.
Possible. Yeah, it's possible.
Well, it's correlation. Correlations and causation are not the same.
Correct. Correlations and causations aren't the same. I will say that, I can only kind of speak for YouTube. I would go back to what I mentioned before, that it's really important to us that time on YouTube is felt to be time well spent by the teens themselves, by the younger kids, and by their families. And I think that as long as we're really focused on the expert feedback and the user feedback and ensuring that we can remove as much regret as possible for that time and make it as enriching as we can while still very entertaining, et cetera, I think that we'll be doing what we can. And like I mentioned before, YouTube is recognized, kind of stands out in that regard, right? We are lots of things. We can be a library. We can be a place where you find community, people like you. And I think that that's very positive for everyone's mental health, including under 16s or under 18s.
Every technology, and I don't care, fire, the wheel, you name it, every technology has unintended negative consequences. That's true with literally everything. You can't walk out your front door. In fact, you can't even lie in bed without taking some risk. And we always tend to focus on the risks, and you're never going to see a newspaper headline that said all planes landed safely yesterday. But if one in a million planes crashes, that's going to be a front page story. And I think that's often the way the media, and I myself have worked for many mainstream media organizations, but we have a tendency, if it bleeds, it leads. So, and I think YouTube gets caught up in that as well. Well, James, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time.
This has been great. I'm so glad you had me on here.
Are We Doing Tech Right is produced by Christopher Lee. Maureen Cochan is the executive producer. Theme music by Will Maggid. I'm Larry Maggid.